best thing about working for the Lannisters. 20% off every fast food in King's Landing. I'm talking Mickey D's, KFC, Burger King.
The king. Bring me one of those chickens.
Come on, bro, I worked hard for these.
Think I'll take 2 chickens.
I mean, I'd give you some, but even with 20% off, I mean, with the food prices nowadays, with the war and the Starks disrupting the supply chain, I read an article that in a few months, the Iron Bank is going to raise interest rates
If any more words come pouring out your mouth, I'm gonna have to eat every chicken in this room.
You know what, guys? Fried chicken isn't good for me anyway, so I'll leave these to the Hound, and I'm gonna go to the kitchen to make myself a feast of ice and fire. A Feast of Ice and Fire by Chelsea Monroe Castle and Sarian Lehrer takes us on a culinary journey across the many regions of George R.R. Martin's epic fantasy series, A Song of Ice and Fire. George R.R. Martin himself has written the intro to this cookbook, so it has the direct stamp of approval from the author himself. The recipes in the cookbook are divided into chapters representing the main regions of the world of Ice and Fire, such as the Wall, the North, the South, King's Landing, Dorne, and across the Narrow Sea. The recipes in the cookbook are heavily inspired by food and recipes stemming from medieval Europe during the Middle Ages. Some of the recipes even have excerpts directly lifted from manuscripts of actual centuries-old medieval recipe books, so you know that a lot of research went into the recipes. Which is very fitting because George R.R. Martin draws a lot of inspiration from history to use in his stories, so it's great to see this cookbook do the same. While there are a lot of historically authentic recipes in this cookbook, several recipes also have modern variants to provide options more akin to modern tastes. I would estimate that most of the recipes have traditional and modern variants, which is great as it gives us home cooks more options, but it also gives you an appreciation for how food preparation and people's tastes have evolved over the years. Each recipe also begins with a quote taken straight from the Song of Ice and Fire novels, referencing when that particular dish was brought up in the story. It's really fascinating to see how often food is mentioned in the books and how much detail George R.R. Martin puts when describing them. Do note that this cookbook is purely based on the novel, so don't expect some stuff from the show like Hot Pie's direwolf bread to show up in here. Now with all this detail comes a price. Because of the quotes, excerpts, and multiple recipe variants, that added amount of text means that there's less room for images, so even though there are still some full-page photos here and there, most of the recipe photos are smaller to accommodate the text, which is fine. The food photos are all staged in a classic medieval style, and it's cool to see the visual difference of the classic and modern takes on the recipes. Now before Sandor comes in here and demands more food, I better go ahead and get cooking. We're gonna take a trip around the known world to see what fantastical delights they have to offer. We start in King's Landing's mean streets of Flea Bottom, where we'll sample some bowls of brown, a cheap meager stew that's a staple diet of the small folk. This recipe is more so to satisfy your curiosity rather than your cravings, so don't expect anything fancy. The good thing is that it can be very customizable since they just use whatever they have available. For this recipe, we need to slow cook about 5 pounds of mixed meat. I'm gonna try to copy the cookbook's example of 2 pounds of beef soup bones with meat, a pound of steak. The cookbook suggested 2 cups of goat meat, but I couldn't find that, so I'm using veal, 2 chicken thighs, 1 whole game hen, 3 cups of dark beer, and top it up with beef broth until the meat is fully submerged. Now cook this on medium-high heat for about 6 hours. I'm gonna use my Instant Pot because every household in Flea Bottom has an Instant Pot, right? 6 episodes of Thrones later, open up your meaty concoction and add in 1 cup of barley, 2 apples chopped up, a cup of peeled pearl onions, and 2 chopped up carrots. And to spice it up, you'll need to add 2 teaspoons of poudre fort. This translates to strong powder and is made up of equal parts ground black pepper, cinnamon, mace, ginger, and cloves. You can also add long pepper or grains of paradise if you want. For additional flavor, you can also add in some extra flavorings such as Worcestershire sauce, garlic, or molasses. The cookbook did say that these are probably not available in King's Landing, so leave them out if you're going for authenticity, but I'm gonna add them in for a bit of flavor. Cook for another 2 hours, and after all that waiting, you're ready to end your day with a rich and hearty bowl of brown. This hearty stew should give us enough energy to leave the hustle and bustle of King's Landing and make a trek up north all the way to Winterfell to join the Northerners for a feast. We're having Aurochs roasted with leeks. In a roasting tray, spread out 6 leeks, cut into 1/4-inch slices using the white and light green parts only. Add to that 4 carrots, also cut into 1/4-inch thickness. Then spread out the cloves of 1 head of garlic. Add a small bunch of fresh thyme, rosemary, bay, sage, or a combination of any. Then drizzle with some olive oil and toss to coat. For this recipe, ideally we would use 3 pounds of aurochs meat like the Northerners would, but unfortunately they are now extinct in our world, so you will need to substitute that with top round of bison or beef, which is what I'm doing. Drizzle some olive oil and season with kosher salt and black pepper, and roast this in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour. While we wait on that, let's make a medieval black pepper sauce. First, you're gonna need a slice of bread that's been toasted until black. Already I'm scratching my head, but I'm curious to see where this goes. Then add in 1/3 cup of verjuice or equal parts cider vinegar and water, which is what I'm doing. Also add in a tablespoon of red wine vinegar. You're supposed to soak the burnt toast in the liquid and break it apart, but when I did, it was still way too thick and not sauce-like at all. Ideally, I'd like to stick as close to the recipe as possible, but this is just not gonna work. So I added more cider and red wine vinegar and a bit of water in an attempt to make it more sauce-like. Then I added in the rest of the spices, a tablespoon of ground black pepper and a 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger. Definitely looks more like a sauce now, but I'm still kinda iffy about it. Only one way to find out if it's good. After the hour has passed, use a meat thermometer to check if the meat is done. The cookbook suggests that 145 degrees Fahrenheit would be about medium. I was kinda scared to undercook it, so I put it in for a bit longer and ended up with a medium well. Let the meat rest for at least 15 minutes before slicing it thinly to serve with the veggies, and you're ready to feast on this epic Winterfell dish. After the evening's festivities, we depart on a journey across the narrow sea all the way to Essos just to try this sweet snack, Tyroshi Honeyfingers. In a medium saucepan, add in a cup of whole milk, then add in a 2/3 cup of flour a bit at a time while mixing. Whisk it all together and make sure that there are no clumps. Then add in a tablespoon of olive oil and 2 tablespoons of sherry. Cook this over medium-high heat and keep stirring it until you get a thick porridge. Then remove it from the heat and keep stirring to further cool it down. When it's gone down to lukewarm, add in 1 beaten egg and blend it in. Then add in 1/3 cup of chopped pine nuts and a dash of cinnamon and black pepper to taste. Stir it all together, then add in another 3/4 cup of flour to make a dough that's sticky but can still be handled. Then on a board, flour the surface and your hands to be able to handle the dough easier, and then press the dough down to a rectangle shape that's about 1 inch thick. I don't know if I messed up my dough, but I found it incredibly sticky and hard to work with, even with a floured surface. So I called for help, and MisoHungrie had to bail me out.
I love you. You will always be my queen.
After much struggle, we managed to cut them to finger-sized strips, and all that's left to do is to fry them in a pan with a 1/2 inch worth of olive oil until they're nice and golden brown and crispy. Remove them from the oil and let them drain on a paper towel-lined plate. Then bathe each one in some sweet, sweet honey and sprinkle on some cinnamon and pine nuts for garnish. There it is, a mountain of honey fingers worthy of the Khaleesi herself. Now that we've got the goods, let's eat. Let's dig into this bowl of brown. I'm not expecting this dish to wow me, and the cookbook made note of that, but I do admire the commitment to authenticity of this cookbook. Taste-wise, yeah, it's nothing great, but it's not bad either. The meat of the chicken, beef, and veal are nice and tender because of the slow cooking, and the barley and veggies are soft and fluffy. The broth itself is pretty bland. I'm glad I added some of the flavorings, but I definitely should have added more. If you're not a fan of bones, this will surely bother you, but I don't mind. I think it adds to the experience. Would I make it again? Probably not, but it's pretty neat to just throw a bunch of things in a pot and have a hearty meal waiting for you at the end of the day. Now to something a bit more opulent. Let's try these roasted meat and veg. Starting with the leeks and carrots first. Really lovely, cooked perfectly soft, and the smell from the herbs makes this pretty addicting to eat. Onto the meat, it's pretty good. I love the seasoning on the exterior, and even though I was aiming for medium but went a bit over, I still enjoyed the texture of the medium well I ended up with. The meat pairs perfectly with veg, but let's see if it pairs well with the sauce. You know what? It's actually not too bad. It tastes like HP or A1 steak sauce. It has the nice peppery tartness, and the burnt toast gives it a texture and a hint of bitterness, which works really well. Didn't expect to like this sauce, but yeah, I'm definitely gonna finish this. Now dessert, let's get our hands dirty with sticky Tyroshi Honeyfingers. These little sticks of dough are absolutely drowning in honey and I'm all for it. I actually really love these and it actually tastes different than I thought. I was expecting more of a hard cookie-like crunch, but it's more akin to a honey-glazed mini donut. The outside has a nice crunch, but the inside is still nice and soft and spongy. I really like the texture and subtle crunch of the pine nuts, and the warm cinnamon flavor goes perfectly with honey. I usually save the food I make for leftovers for the week, but I ate all these the same night I shot this video. Finger licking good. Final verdict of A Feast of Ice and Fire, a delicious blend of story and history.
So I actually had a longer intro planned, but it was running too long, so I had to cut it a bit short. But if you want to see the full video and you want to join all these awesome people in supporting the channel and having access to bonus content and weekly updates, then I invite you to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/MisoHungrie. See you there, and thanks for watching.